heat up your frozen dinners, grab your TV tray, and settle in for another episode of the Plus Platoon, your podcast for all things Disney Plus, brought to you by Disney Plus fans. Watch along with us every week as we cover all the new, the old, the good, and the bad on Disney Plus. So put down that remote, don't touch that dial, and welcome your fabulous Plus Platoon host.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Plus Platoon. We're a Disney Plus fan podcast that gives honest, spoiler-filled reviews of movies and shows on Disney Plus. We'll look at new releases, coming attractions, and we'll even go back into the vault to revisit some of the classic Disney that's on the platform. Make sure you're subscribed and you will never miss a moment. I'm going to bring in Kate. Kate, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great. I'm coming to you from our new home in Atlanta.
Yeah, glad to see you're enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we've got Pete coming to us, like me, from our typical home.
Coming from my normal home in Buffalo. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the space race.
Yeah, that's like, when they, who can get to Mars first, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Or it's the Jetsons, or is it like
still working on it?
Or the Klingons and the Federation trying to get across the neutral zone fastest?
That's right.
Sorry, different space races. Sorry. Anyway, so guys, the Eclipse is this coming Monday. Pete is actually in the path of totality at his house. I am going to be attempting to drive down to Dallas about 6 hours or so to try and see it and dodge some clouds. Kate will be, smiling and waving at it as it blows a couple thousand miles past her in California. So, but
yep.
With the Eclipse coming, we had to do something space related. And so what we did is we actually went back to an old episode of the Disneyland TV show from 1957 called Mars and Beyond. This was actually one of several episodes that Walt did about that were considered to be supposed to be educational about space. Walt was a huge proponent of NASA, a huge proponent of the space systems and getting us to the moon and beating the Russians and all that kind of stuff. And this there was Man in Space, which was even more directed towards, yes, this is how we're going to get people up there. And I don't know if you guys noticed, one of the people on it was Werner von Braun, who was the main German scientist who came over and essentially ran NASA in the 50s and 60s. And so they got him on the show. Was it, I said, come out in 1957. Did it put out stuff that is still known today? No. But, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Kate, I want to know what about this was out of this world?
So, this was not my favorite thing that we've ever watched. However, I did appreciate the, Disney animators, especially around that time, had such a great eye for the characters that they brought to life and matching it with the music. Fantasia is a perfect example of that. Bambi that we just watched was a great example of that. And this did not disappoint in that. And when they were talking about what all of the creatures on Mars might be like, or how they might act or walk or move, it showed that. And I thought that was really cool. I that definitely kept my attention. It was always good. So as someone who worked for Disney, you feel like you've seen all of the Walt Disney clips, like any clips of him. And I hadn't seen this. So that was kind of cool to see something new that I hadn't seen of Walt Disney. Overall, it was cute. Pete, you go.
So the biggest kick I got out of this is listening to your ghost host be the narrator. That was Paul Frees.
That's how I knew that voice.
Yeah, that was Paul Frees. I mean, he did a lot of other things for Disney and for other voiceover work. My favorite piece of trivia with him is he was the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Yes.
So he actually went, but yeah, he was, he did a lot of voice work for Disney, and that was him in this. And I get a kick out of whenever I hear him. And then I also thought, I mean, I always find these old episodes interesting. There were certainly interesting parts of it. I especially enjoyed some of the animation parts of it. Some of the parts, especially the one with where they tell the story of the maiden that gets kidnapped and brought to Mars. That's shown in the sci-fi drive-in at Disney World. So that particular section of that is shown there, and it's interesting. I guess I didn't really realize where that came from, so it was neat to see it. And also the shots of Walt Disney and Garco. Is that the robot?
Yes, Garco.
They have a shot of that in that movie as well. So I liked that, and I also liked that, like, there was a level of education of this that, like, I don't feel like we see on TV anymore. I mean, now we teach our kids with like Bluey and like there's young child education, but this is more directed at, I'll say 6 to 10-year-olds or something like that,
or even older,
right? And like there's almost nothing educational anymore on TV once you get past as I say, like Sesame Street and those type of things. The older kids are just watching,
junk,
YouTube or whatever. So just the level of, and I mean a pretty high level of education relative here that they were showing. So those were all things that I really did like about the show. What about you, Derek?
I enjoy this. This is actually something I actually show in my classroom every year. We do a science fiction unit, and this is one of the first things I show, because a lot of these science fiction stories that everyone knows came out of the 50s and 60s. Especially, this is when Ray Bradbury was really ramping up with his stuff. And so I will show this to say, guys, this is kind of what they were thinking back in the 50s and 60s. Because you got to remember, as far as like that the Mars picture with the green on it, and actually the model of it, you have to remember there were no satellites that could take a picture of Mars. So they really thought that it had different green areas on it.
Yep.
Wow.
I love most of the animated segments. The one that we use as part of the Rite of Spring stuff, not so much. With the evolution of life on Earth.
I couldn't tell. Did it because I was thinking at a point it was maybe reusing some of that, but I don't think it reused a lot.
They didn't reuse a ton of it. They reused, I said, the early Rite of Spring stuff, like the amoebas into the smaller animals and stuff.
And we're talking about Fantasia.
Yes, from Fantasia.
Right.
Yes.
Fantasia.
Now, Pete, I got a trivia piece even better for you. Paul Frees was not only the Pillsbury Doughboy. In Some Like It Hot, he was Tony Curtis's voice, because Tony Curtis had a convincing female voice.
Oh, really?
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 Huh?
That isn't Tony Curtis's voice?
No, it's Jack Lemmon's voice as the girl, but that is not Tony Curtis. That is Paul Frees doing Tony Curtis.
I love that movie. I never knew that. That's fabulous.
See what you get when you hang out with me, all sorts of fun facts.
And then Tony Curtis, when he's being Tony Curtis is playing Cary Grant.
Well, yeah, that too. Yeah,
he puts on being Cary Grant when he's with Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. But I enjoy this for the campiness of it. I really enjoy a lot of these old nostalgia based. This is the old original Disney stuff. The animated sections were actually done by Ward Kimball, and he actually got in a fight over the alien part with Walt Disney because Disney did not want Donald Duck included in that segment going across. And Ward Kimball fought him on it, said, no, we need the laugh. And he left it in there, and Walt never liked it.
Huh.
That's one of those things that they did. I mean, they basically they bucked what Walt wanted on that one and said. But you also have to remember at this point in time, he's about ready to announce the next growth project of Disneyland. Because let's face it, it's 2 years on, so he's about ready to announce the Matterhorn, the new basically finished Tomorrowland. So he wasn't really super focused on these.
Right.
One thing that's interesting to me is this was done in 57, and Walt looks old for still having another 10 years to go.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoy this. I said, I enjoy this for the campiness. Is it the most entertaining? No. But if I knew what I was getting going into this, so I think that helped. So, okay. So, Kate, what about this should have been sent back to space and you can't say the entire show?
No, it just did not hold my attention very well. Because I was like, oh, it's only like 55 minutes. This is gonna be cake to watch. And I was watching it and I was sending a couple emails while watching it, and then I had to pause it and I literally go, I'm only 18 minutes into this. I'm only 18 minutes. So
now you know how I feel on Marvel movies.
Yeah, it just drug to me. It was, I mean, going back to like a little bit of the positive, it was interesting to see what they thought of space stuff in the 50s. Like that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it just drug. It just did not hold my attention very well. And I gave it the old college try. I really did try, but I just found it quite boring. But I can't really tell you why. It just didn't hold my attention. But what about you, Pete?
I'd say, to be more specific on that, I there were parts of it that I had that problem, and particularly I noticed a lot of things they were very repetitive, where they would like cover something and then they would cover the same thing again. I especially noticed it at the end when they were talking about like going to Mars, and they had the scientists talking about it, and then they showed the animation and it showed the same thing again, and it was or like they said the same thing again. So I thought there were parts of it that were just repeating the same thing over and over again, and that made it feel very long to me at times. So that was my biggest complaint. Kate, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just remembered. Oh my gosh, it was probably halfway in when the science guy the real person started talking. Oh my God. And like you could tell that because it was like he was so monotone and you could tell he was reading what he was saying by his eyes. And then he was like, you need 3 things, something to live on Mars. Air. Da da da. Da da da. That was the only interesting part. It's because he moved his hand. Like it was, oh God. It was just like, I feel like I'm sitting in a horrible science lecture right now. Rough. Anyway, Derek, you go.
Yeah, I said there are sections that.
So I'm an engineer, not a scientist, but I have to say when they put us in front of a camera to talk about things, we're pretty much the same.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Derek.
Derek.
Yeah. So I would definitely agree that there are sections of this that got boring. I'll agree with you on the repetitive, and Pete on the repetitive. That section there of him talking about Mars, and then when they showed you what Mars was probably actually like, very likely. The Rite of Spring section is the evolution of life section is not. I think that's the section that really doesn't belong in this necessarily. It's almost like they had to find some way to fill time. They had to fill another 8 minutes, so they just threw that in there. Yeah, those are probably my big complaints. I kind of give the scientist a pass a little bit, just because, as Pete said, that's probably the first time he was ever on any kind of a camera. And because I'm back in 57, he had never been on a camera, had probably never had to memorize stuff that Disney wanted exact.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't blame him for reading it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and honestly, they probably
today.
yeah, they probably gave him cue cards and said, "This is what you're reading." And yeah.
I mean, if you talk about eyes going back and forth, you don't want to look too closely at Marlon Brando and The Godfather.
Yeah.
Because he did not memorize any of his stuff. He was reading the entire thing. So,
Wow.
now, I said this was done back 1957. The space race was just starting to really wind up. Sputnik was not for another couple more years. And so it was very much yeah, actually Sputnik was actually later this year. Sputnik was October of 57. So but then people got fascinated, stupid space toys. I mean, thinking back to the Prospector but yeah, those stupid toys. But my question is, space for so long, especially kids, held our imaginations. I want to go to space. I want to go be an astronaut. I want to go explore places. I want to go, and it's different places, but especially space. And my question is, and this is kind of more of as a society type thing. Does space still hold our imaginations, or is it something that it's been happening so often with SpaceX and such that we don't really care anymore? And Kate, I'm going to kind of let you get started on that one.
Ooh, I get to start all of them tonight. Yeah, I think it does, because things like movies like The Martian, I love Apollo 13. I will watch Apollo 13 every single time that it's on television. There's still movies that Gravity did really well a few years ago. And there's so many different aspects to space, and there's so much unknown in space that I think that we will always be fascinated with the unknown of excuse me, other life out there, or and now, especially with what's happening with the race to Mars. I don't know if it's really a race, but or with the idea of going to Mars, and civilians launching themselves in a rocket, like not astronauts, like just really rich people shooting themselves in a rocket into space.
I'm
I
all
think
for it.
that there will I think there will always be um a certain interest. I don't know if interest isn't the word I want. I don't know what the word I want is, but a certain
Intrigue.
curiosity about space. So I don't think that that has gone away. What about you, Pete?
So I think, and like I a lot of times joke like I'm the old guy here, and so I remember back earlier. I mean, I don't remember. I wasn't born in the '60s, so I don't remember the space race. But I do remember like the space shuttle program, and I think that I think space itself, like people are still fascinated with it for sure, to a degree, but I don't think the idea of like rockets and space exploration is necessarily as it was then, because I think that it was really part of the American, like the '60s was very unique, right? Because the space race was actually a surrogate for almost the Cold War, where it was all about beating the Russians, right? And so it was like really a big national mandate that occurred during the '60s to get to the moon first. And even, you talked about Apollo 11, even in Apollo 11, they showed that, okay, we got to the moon. Now people kind of stopped caring. And, by Apollo, by Apollo 13 already, they were, what was it?
Yeah, you said 11. It was 13 that they kind of said, who cares?
Right. Apollo 11 was the one that actually landed on the moon, right?
Yes. But you said we were talking. Anyway, go on.
Okay.
I got you. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I got you.
But all I'm saying is like I think after that, it kind of slid down a little bit in the American experience, because it's like, okay, we got there. What's the big deal now? What do we do with it? and I think even like as that I think when I think of space, I think of the space shuttle. For my childhood was the big thing, was because that was all through the 80s, the development of a space shuttle that could go up into space and come back down and everything like that. But now it's all been kind of privatized, and yeah, sure, they're still doing rocket launches every, all the time, but you don't really, it doesn't even make really the news hardly ever anymore. So I don't think it's as big a thing in our collective consciousness in terms of like the reality of it. I think for kids, I think kids are still fascinated with it, but it's more about, Star Wars or, space movies or space stories. Yeah,
Marvel,
or Guardians of the Galaxy or something like really out there versus reality. Now, I agree. I agree with what you say, Kate, that like movies like The Martian and Apollo 13 and Gravity still hold our interest because of, they're realistic, and it still fascinates us. But I don't think it's to the degree that it was in the 60s, and especially in the 60s, but even back in the 70s and 80s. I think it's gone down in priority quite a bit. So what about you, Derek?
I think people are still, I would agree. I think people are definitely still interested in space. I think I will be interested to see when we actually start landing people on the moon again,
Hmm.
if that kicks it into another gear. Because I think right now it's, let's face it, the space station's been up there for 20 years, 25 years. Launching people to the space station is not a big deal anymore. Launching satellites and reusing them has not become, reusing the rockets is not that big of a deal anymore. I mean, I think SpaceX just did like its 220th reuse of a booster or something like that. Not the same booster, but it's becoming everyday normal. I think that's what they ran into. Sadly, that's what it was. That's what was happening come January of '86, and then Challenger blew up, and that re-kicked the interest into space. And then not as much with Columbia, just because not every, people weren't just sitting there. Everyone watched the Challenger.
Yeah.
Everyone. I mean, I remember watching the Challenger explosion. Kate, you don't, but anyway.
I don't.
It was 86. You don't.
No, but I remember learning about it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but I was in high school, and like we weren't watching it, but like when it happened, like the news went throughout the school, right? Everybody stopped. There were certain things that, certain things that happened. 9/11
It was almost a 9/11 type moment.
It was that type of moment that everybody stopped what they were doing and turned on the TV to see what was going on.
Everyone who was old enough remembers where they were when the Challenger blew up.
Right.
Yeah.
As I said, it will be interesting to see what happens when we start landing people on the moon again, and if especially Pete and I's lifetimes, if we end up with people on Mars. I think within my son's lifetime, maybe. I think within our lifetime, it might be a stretch, to be perfectly honest. Just depends on, honestly, how much money Elon's willing to throw at that.
I think more so than Mars, I think if not just landing people on moon, but if they establish
a base
on the moon, I think that could get a lot more interest in like, people wanting to know more about what that's like and everything like that. So, but yeah, even thinking back, like there was a ton of science fiction in the 70s and things like that with like moon bases and all those type of things. And now everything out there that's space is mostly much more fanciful. Again, Martian was a great movie, very entertaining, and that was reality based, but so much of science fiction is out there science fiction versus reality based when it comes to space.
And most of it's aimed not at kids.
Right.
Because And part of it is back in the 50s and 60s when this was going on, you had Lost in Space, you had Buck Rogers, you had all these space things aimed at kids. Now I don't know how kids would actually take a space themed show.
Yeah.
That's not like tied into Marvel or tied into Star Wars or anything like that. Because I don't count. Yes, Star Wars is in space, but it's gotten to the point of I don't count Star Wars as a space movie anymore because so much of it doesn't happen in space.
Well, and again, to me, it's space fantasy versus like even Lost in Space, which was a TV show and it had like goofy aliens and things like that. It was kind of based on humans going out into space, or
Right.
even think about Star Trek was humans going out into space. Star Wars is, a galaxy far, far away. So to me, it's almost not the same thing. I agree.
Yeah.
But the yeah, I don't know. I don't know what, it would be interesting to see them do a more grounded science fiction space thing that doesn't have aliens or
Right.
well actually I don't know if we're getting off topic of Disney, but there was a show called The Expanse not too long ago. I don't know if either of you ever watched The Expanse. It's definitely science fiction, but it was based on it's on Amazon Prime now. I think it was originally on Sci-Fi, but then it moved to Amazon Prime. And it's a show. I haven't watched the whole series, but it's a show based on a more realistic view of the future where we've like colonized the asteroid belt. We've also started colonizing Mars, and it's kind of like, I don't want to get into it on this show, but if anybody's out there has seen it, if you like a more reality based science fiction, it's very, very good.
Cool.
So,
okay. So you've watched part of it, correct? I'm assuming on that, Pete.
The Expanse, I've watched the first two. It's always on my Kindle, but I was into it for a while and then I fell out of it, and I got to get back into it. But
I'm just as someone who I love space, guys. We have actually one of the premier space museums, like 30 minutes from us in the middle of Kansas. It's like we've got the original. We have the Apollo 13 spacecraft. We have the Liberty Bell 7 at that. But that's okay. There's where I was going. Sorry, guys. It took a minute.
You're good.
It's okay.
One thing I never like about how they represent the asteroid belt is how they show all the asteroids so close together.
Right. Yeah.
When you realize most asteroids are as far apart as Earth is from its moon.
Oh, wow.
How far apart most asteroids are from each other.
Huh.
So it's not this tightly packed group of asteroids that go around. So anyway, all right. As we always do, whenever we review something that's kind of standalone, and yes, I view this episode as a standalone.
Yeah.
We give it cups of pixie dust out of 5. Kate, what are you going to give?
I'm going to give it a 2. It's good, nostalgic, classic Walt. And we love that. It didn't hold my attention well, though. It is very dated, but so I'm going to give it a 2.
I'm going to give it a 3. I think, again, it's a your mileage may vary type thing. If you like the history of Disneyland, the television show, and it's doesn't really spend a lot of time talking about anything in the parks. I don't think there's really much mention of that, but just seeing what was being presented to the American public out of Walt Disney and in Disneyland. There's some fun animation bits in it. I think there's enough in it that we watched it with my 20-year-old daughter. She didn't leave the room. She watched it, so it was interesting enough to her. She's an animation major too, so that might have helped because kind of anything animation she likes. But I think it's certainly worth watching once for anyone that enjoys again that history of that period. I liked that it it kind of tried to keep to the facts more or less, and was trying to show, but it was showing that view of that time. So, talking about that they don't really know what's on Mars, but we don't think it's going to be like, an alien race or anything like that, but there could be, plants or something like that. So I like the way it was presented. So 3 from me.
Okay. It's a 3.5 for me, actually, just because you guys know me. I love most of the nostalgia stuff. This kind of old Walt, old animation stuff. I love.
Yeah.
I have memories of watching it when I was little, and this was one of those that was on. Come on, every once in a while on at our public broadcasting system, always used from 5 to 5:40 they would show an episode of Wonderful World of Disney. Because yes, it was on PBS for a while. Who knows?
Interesting.
But and I'm sorry, Disney, please bring us Swamp Fox. Please bring us the Swamp Fox.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, Leslie Nielsen in a serious role. It's fantastic.
It's kind of like Davy Crockett, but it's based on.
Do you know who Leslie Nielsen is?
I do know who Leslie Nielsen is, and I'm surprised I don't know what this is because I watched like the Disney Vault. I watched Zorro and all of that
It's
stuff.
Davy Crockett, but the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
Isn't that wait, Johnny?
No, that's Johnny Tremaine. You're thinking.
Yeah, is that not?
That's Revolutionary War also, but that's a movie. Not a good movie.
Okay.
No.
But so yeah. So anyway, so gets decent ratings from us, not great, but I think, as I said, Pete and I said, if you want the nostalgia of the old Disneyland, of the old early space race time, because it would be interesting to see. I think this came out. I need to see. I'm trying to find the date of it. It actually came out December 4th. So this came out about 2 months post Sputnik. So this would have been prime. This would have been what everyone wanted to watch,
right,
because it's all space.
Yeah.
So, okay, Kate, what do we got for the Disney Plus news this week?
Disney Plus news. Only 2 things. First, long the protector of the MCU, Disney Plus is now starting to see DC films arrive on the combined Disney Hulu service.
What?
So
interesting. And last but not least, Descendants: The Rise of Red will debut on July 12th, and one of my friends is one of the characters in it.
Oh wow.
And it is Queen of Hearts' daughter. Queen of Hearts character. The main character is either. I would be first to admit, I have not watched any of the Descendants stuff. Are they the actual characters, or are they their kids?
It's their kids.
It's primarily their kids, but the actual characters are there at times.
Yeah.
Right.
So like you do have Maleficent, you do have I know one of them, Hades, is the bad guy. So there's the parents are there too, but it's focused on the kids.
And so this one is Queen of Hearts. So
I'll be honest, the Descendants movies actually aren't terrible. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, sure. I have watched none of them.
The first one is not that bad. They, like anything else, they're kind of diminishing returns.
Is it like High School Musical? The first one wasn't that bad, and the rest just kind of stink.
I wouldn't say they stink. I mean, I agree with Kate. There's charm to them. I just think they get, like, the songs get worse, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know if any of the main characters are coming back, because
that I don't know.
It was Sophia Carlson and Dove Cameron. And yeah.
And then the guy who was Cruella de Vil's son died.
The actor died. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't. Yeah.
Can't remember.
But yeah, I want to say that my friend Anthony is the son of Hades, but I could be wrong on that. He is it is a prominent character from what I understand. I haven't
Awesome.
seen it, obviously, but so yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
Okay, next week, because it is coming out this week, we're going to be watching Wish. I'm trying to keep an open mind on this, guys. I promise I am. I have heard nothing good about this movie at all.
See, and I've only heard good things about it.
Who are you listening to?
People from Disney.
Oh, so people who are still drinking the Kool-Aid. Gotcha.
Yeah.
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 And I guess I've heard mixed things. I've heard negative, I've heard positive. So I don't think anybody's saying it's the greatest movie ever made, but we'll see. I mean, I'll say this: almost every Disney animated movie has something. Almost every Disney animated movie has something worth watching.
And from what I've heard in this one, it might be the villain.
Yeah.
We do love a good villain.
Yeah. I do love a good villain. I also hate a bad villain. So, or excuse me, I hate a wishy-washy villain.
Yeah. My
Who's
daughter
your
pointed
least favorite villain?
Are we talking typical Disney movies or some of the more I mean, probably one of my least favorite Disney villains is the bad guy prince in Frozen. Just did not work for me. I just did not work. Yeah. No, Hans was the I thought Hans was the boyfriend.
Kristoff is the
Kristoff was the boyfriend.
Kristoff is the boyfriend.
Then Hans, sure. But I mean, it's just, and that's part of it, is the more modern ones, I think, have struggled with villainy as far as they're afraid to let their villains get too bad.
Yeah, and my daughter pointed that out, that of recent years, there haven't been a lot of good villains in Disney movies in the last 10 years or so. And
I would agree with that.
With Hans being one of the better ones, to be honest. So
which is not great.
Which is not great. No, I wouldn't call that a great villain, but
I would rather have the Lamb Mayor as a villain than Hans. Like the Lamb Mayor in Zootopia. I thought that worked better than Hans.
Yeah. Yes.
Hans, they tried to get too cute with him being, oh, I'm really the bad guy. That twist at the end. I'm sorry. Who didn't really see that one coming? Okay.
Actually, I don't know that I completely saw it. I think I saw it before they actually revealed it, but not.
Yeah,
like I didn't know it right from the beginning.
That's fair. So,
I did not see it coming.
Actually, I would argue one of the better villains they've had lately, Sid. Pixar has had the decent villains lately.
Sid is 30 years old, Derek.
Yeah, Sid is
no. But Pixar has had the better villains lately.
Yes.
Yeah. And part of that problem with that is they have no new original ideas coming out. It's all sequels.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but even there, the last few movies, like Turning Red and Luca, and there isn't really a villain in them,
And there's not really going to be a villain in Inside Out either.
Right. Inside Out's another example. There isn't really a villain.
Is going to be hormones. I mean,
right.
They are pretty villainous.
And the parents accepting what she is and not. I mean, I can kind of see that one now coming, but it's just, we'll see how Wish goes. Guys, if you have suggestions for us,
that's why we're here.
That is why we're here. We'll watch stuff, so you might not have to. So, guys, if you have suggestions for us, please email us at plusplatoon@gmail.com, Facebook, Instagram, tweet at us, Facebook message, anything. We answer anything that we get sent. So send it to us. We are on all the major podcasting services. New episodes come out every Thursday there and on YouTube. For Kate and Pete and the crew that is on spring break this week, we will see everyone next week. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks for watching this week's episode of the Plus Platoon. Be sure to subscribe to the Plus Platoon podcast to keep getting great content each week. Then head over to Apple Podcast and leave those 5-star reviews as they help make the Plus Platoon visible to even more Disney Plus fans. Also, go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the Plus Platoon channel, where you can watch all future episodes live. If you have a question for the Plus Platoon, please send us an email to plusplatoon@gmail.com or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @PlusPlatoon.
The Plus Platoon is a Disney Plus fan podcast and is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company or the Disney Plus streaming service. All opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the individual hosts and in no way reflect the views of the Walt Disney Company.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode because the Plus Platoon is to be continued.